One of the main reasons we want to think about how we set up an environment with an organization to be more towards cooperative conflict and less towards actual conflict is that conflict and the amount of conflict in an organization is a strong predictor of how much deviant organizational behavior will also be in that same organization. So when we talk about deviant organizational behavior, what we're referring to is actions on the part of employees that intentionally violate the norms of the organization and or the formal rules of society, resulting in negative consequences. So usually when we talk about deviant organizational behavior, they are behaviors that are often considered illegal or against the norms of society outside of an organization, but somehow get rationalized as okay within an organization. So some of the things we're talking about here includes workplace aggression. So not only is there conflict, the conflict results in actual aggression within the workplace. It can be whistleblowing, and we're going to talk about not whistleblowing as a deviant organizational behavior, but basically how people respond to whistleblowing as a deviant organizational behavior. Cyber loafing, or basically just loafing in general, workplace bullying, and of course, employee theft. So let's talk a little about each of these and also how they negatively impact an organization. So there's several types of workplace aggression. Obstructionism, behavior designed to obstruct or impede the target's performance. So in other words, actively working to basically think of this as kind of passive aggressive, keeping information from key people to make it harder for them to perform their jobs. Usually this is in some form of backlash or attack upon the person for perceived conflict or slights. But the result, of course, is the organization itself suffers. There can also be overt aggression, workplace violence, destruction of property, verbal abuse. All of these can fall into that area of workplace aggression. And this is a growing problem in the workplace as people are working longer hours with higher demands and organizations are looking to potentially trim the number of staff that they're currently working with or hiring. All of these can result to conflict within the workplace. Specifically, people are likely to fight over the resources of maintaining their jobs. And this can result in a lot of these negative behaviors. So again, whistleblowing, the disclosure by employees of illegal, immoral, or illegitimate practices to people and organizations able to take action. So again, this isn't necessarily a deviant behavior, but we do want to recognize that when people do make the decision to blow the whistle on a particular procedure, we also need to make sure that they are well protected from potential attacks upon themselves for doing so. A lot of times organizations will have internal agencies that address this. There's also external agencies that can be used to this, and it actually is illegal within the United States to basically hold someone accountable for blowing the whistle on legitimate illegal concerns within an organization. So another destructive organizational deviance is cyber loafing, the practice of using a company's email and or internet facilities for personal use. In other words, it's using the access that we have through our computers and through our computer systems to do non-work related behaviors. So this can be as anything as simple as spending 5 minutes of company time surfing the internet. This can be using social media, but not for directly workplace positions or required positions. So for example, I'm actually expected to be fairly active on LinkedIn, and I actually log those hours that I spend on LinkedIn every week as a part of my job. However, I am not expected to be active on Instagram or Facebook or any of these other sites. Employees can spy and use technology to keep track of such activities, especially people working on other projects or non-work related projects while using their computers at work. And the courts have ruled that this is legal, though it does have to be included in the employee handbook, and the employee has to be known that it is a possibility. So again, these are all different ways, and when we're talking about thinking about destructive organizational deviance, what we're really talking about is when employees, for whatever reason, are spending the time that they're being paid to focus on organizational goals, to focus on their own personal goals, or to simply focus on their own relaxation. This is different than expected relaxation time. So a lot of organizations have actually moved to where, especially for people that are working almost primarily at a workstation or a computer, that there's actually required time away from that time work. A lot of companies have actually installed monitoring devices that if you have been typing or constantly working on your computer for more than 45 minutes or 60 minutes, it'll make you take a 5 or 10-minute break. So we're not necessarily suggesting that people should be working every single moment that they're at work, but we want to make sure that they are not wasting or using their work time to be working on other projects. And this, again, generally occurs as an outcome of someone being not committed, dissatisfied, or experiencing a lot of conflict in the workplace. So another problem or area that we have to concern ourselves with in organizations is looking out for aggression and bullying. Workplace aggression is acts of verbal or physical abuse towards others in the organization, ranging from mild to severe. Again, causes can vary. It can be personal, interpersonal, so individual personality differences like high trait anger. There can be a positive attitude towards revenge. So someone that feels like they've been wronged wants to take it out on those that they perceive as having wronged them. Might be past experience with aggression, might be perceptions of unfairness, and might be environment which expresses anger overtly. So all of these are factors that we can look at. So we can think about, how do we set up an environment that makes people less likely to want to express aggression in the workplace? At what points can we actually create policies, role modeling, and environments that suggest this is not a normal behavior? And also, if we do have productive workers who are high in trait anger or have a positive attitude towards revenge behaviors, we may also want to think about, how can we make sure that they're not being perceived that they are being slighted, and how can we make sure that they're less likely to express their anger onto others. All of these are things that a lot of companies have been thinking about, and we can see a lot of programs in various companies that address these issues, such as various relaxation techniques or resources for mental health, but also for making sure that there is a zero tolerance policy within the organization and the norms for workplace aggression. So workplace bullying is the repeated mistreatment of an individual at work in a manner that endangers his or her physical or mental health, usually conducted by a person in position of power, so abusive supervision. So again, this does not result in organizational goals. If a manager is bullying their direct reports, in other words, constantly mistreating them, endangering their physical or mental health, generally speaking, that person is going to underperform, their job satisfaction is going to plummet, and they're much more likely to leave the organization and not think kindly of the organization. In other words, it also affects organizational commitment. So all of these are factors that make it imperative that organizations be setting up systems to look for this behavior and to make sure this behavior does not occur. And this can be giving people resources of how they can report managers or people that are bullying them within the workplace. So we'd love to think that the idea of high school or schoolyard aggression and bullying is something that occurs only with kids, but it actually occurs throughout the life cycle. Once a bully, always a bully jumps to mind. And this is not 100% true, but it does mean that if someone is inclined towards bullying, if the behavior in the past has actually been basically an adaptive behavior, they've been rewarded for it, whatever that reward is, and they are put into a situation that does not discourage bullying, they're likely to continue to bully. So we need to think about that as well. So some tips to avoid aggression. So again, establishing a clear disciplinary procedure, that zero tolerance policy, and also a very clear message that it will not be accepted within the organization, and that there are clear disciplinary procedures if someone participates in it. We need to train managers in their interpersonal skills so they recognize that it isn't just about physical aggression, it can also be emotional or psychological aggression. And to conduct periodic employee satisfaction and commitment assessments to look for problems. And most organizations do some form of this at this point, where they're actually looking to see, is there lower or statistically significantly lower satisfaction and commitment in various groups based on their managers? And if so, that often is an indicator that something may be occurring. Now, it may not be the managers themselves. There may not be bullying or aggression. It may be that their entire department is under stress, including the manager. But it does give us some information that we can use to start looking for these within an organization. And finally, we can look at employee theft, the taking of company's property for personal use. Generally, the causes for employee theft are, first, basically an environment that encourages it. It's the norm. You see coworkers doing it as well. So not stealing goes against the group norms. Everyone's doing it. And generally speaking, one of the biggest predictors is a perception that the person is being unfair in their treatment or pay. So if someone perceives that they're not being paid enough for their time, they can easily justify to themselves to take small objects from work, employee theft, to basically make up the difference. So not only do we need to set up an environment that makes it clear that this is not acceptable, we need to make sure that if it does start, that it is stopped very quickly so that it is not creating a norm. And we do need to address, are we paying people fairly? Are we treating them fairly? Or at least are they understanding that they are being treated unfairly? And sometimes this may simply be organizational communication to make sure people's perceptions match the reality of the situation they're in. So some tips for reducing theft: involve employees in the creation of a theft policy. So basically, this is also a good suggestion across all of these, is the more people are involved in the creation of the policies, they're much more likely to follow those policies. Communicate the cost for stealing. So make it very clear how it affects the organization, and if the organization is affected, how it affects people's pay and how many people can be hired. Treat people fairly and make sure they're being paid a fair wage, and make sure that everyone in the organization is being a good role model. If the manager that's in charge of a bunch of direct reports is seen stealing, it is very likely those direct reports will do it as well. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to go out to Canvas and go to the discussion board. After you finish these slides and read the chapter, I wish you the best of luck taking the quiz for this week, and I'll talk to you next week.